So, that's a hot cup of coffee. Hello.
Must be nice.
Look at that hairline of yours, hey?
Like that?
Or lack of it. When are you shaving that bad boy off?
It's getting thicker.
Okay. Anyway, let's jump to the topics, then we've got a lot to talk about today. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to start this off with affordable housing. Do you know what affordable housing actually is?
A plan that will never work.
I'm going to take that as a no. You don't know what it is.
I know what it is. It's a percentage of average income, blah, blah, blah.
So affordable housing is deemed housing, whether that's private or government subsidized, that costs less than 30% of one's household income. So to put that in perspective, if you're in Vancouver, our average household income is $82,000 a year, meaning that the property needs to cost you basically less than $24,600 a year. So that equates to a cost, so that's a mortgage or a rent payment of $2,050. Very similar numbers in Toronto, $2,100 a month.
Okay.
So let's start on the affordable housing.
So if you're to be offered affordable housing by the government, that's the prerequisite scale that they're looking at.
It's not even just the government. It's affordable housing it could be private. So if I'm renting you something for $2,000 a month and you're earning $82,000, then you're still technically within affordable housing. So when it comes to the government side, the government is just building affordable housing. So as to what the parameters are on it, it differs and it depends based on where they're built. So
Of course.
let's talk about affordable housing because that's a big platform, whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right, it's something which is spoken about all the time, and it's usually surmised with this magical answer to all. Just like we're going to tax the rich is the magical answer to all, as if we haven't been saying the same thing for decades and still sitting on the same problem.
Your people started that, didn't they? Robin Hood way back.
Whoa, what do you mean, you people?
Robin Hood was in England, wasn't he?
Robin Hood was in England, yes.
That's what I mean, you people. You guys, they've been saying that since the Robin.
He would steal from the rich and give to the poor.
Yeah, and it worked.
Okay, well,
That's how old the genred approach is, what I'm getting at.
hey, I'm from somewhere with a little bit of culture, okay? Anyway, so we're going to jump back into it. So those are the numbers in Vancouver, okay, as what that would need to cost. And this is where it gets interesting and misleading because it just needs to be within that 30% threshold. So if you're in Calgary, where the average household income is $105,000, so significantly higher than places like Vancouver and Toronto, that 30% now comes $2,626 a month. So in Calgary, that's a very, very achievable rent. You could get somewhere pretty nice for that amount, for $2,600. So, and not to mention, when it comes to purchasing property, the home price index in Calgary for apartments is 245,000, and for townhouses is 349,000.
About 5 or 6.
So, well, you compare that to Vancouver, 755,000 and $1,000,001 pretty much, respectively. So,
Yeah.
when you look at the affordable housing side of things, it's obviously not going to work from a numbers standpoint. At least it's not going to work in your major metropolis areas like Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, because I mean, if you're building in Vancouver, for a single family home, you're going to be spending $1.5 million on a lot. And they're not going to be buying single family homes because they need to build pretty much multi-family dwellings, so townhouses and apartments mostly, to make this happen. They're the most cost effective. So and I hate to sound pessimistic when I say this, the government goal, whether you're liberals or conservatives and they say about building affordable housing, the goal is not to get you into affordable housing, it's to build 100,000 affordable housing homes for $4 billion. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter how, they just need to achieve that goal in order to sit back and say, well, we've done our job. And so what that happens is you start getting that in places in Alberta, in like Timmins, Ontario, in other areas where it makes more economical sense and you can get more bang for your buck, because they can achieve the goal, but it stops it continues the runaway markets of Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, etc. from continuously running away, basically. So it's touted as a good thing and the answer to all, but it's really not the answer to all. Jay?
$40,000 per home, if my math is correct. 100,000 houses of $4 grand per build.
There you go.
Whereas it costs $1 million. Let's say it costs $1 million to build a regular house. I don't believe there's no matter where you build a house.
Okay.
My math. Have you done this math, or is my calculator?
I've not done the actual math. There's going to be other things that they're going to save from, that they're going to put into like not trickery of money, but maximizing money, if you will. So $4 billion divided by $40,000. Well, okay, so, but this is then the other thing when it comes to affordable housing. What does affordable housing actually look like?
Well, you can run it from the metrics of the average income that you've talked about before.
No. I mean, in terms of property, what are these properties that they're going to be building? Like, one would assume that you're not getting into a regular single family home, even a regular 650 square foot condo. Like, it's a very, very loose term. But affordable housing has been thrown around since the 80s. So you remember that? That was when you were in your prime.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that's thrown around. So it's a buzzword again, and it's done both by liberals and conservatives. It's not the answer, which leads us on to the next conversation, which is where you and I are going to get into it because we have opposing views. What is the answer?
To your point, you said it's not for, obviously, assisting the market. It's for assisting the specific people that are waiting for affordable housing. So it's not making market product cheaper. However, when they're building this stuff, it's obviously taking land that market housing could be built on. So it's actually deterring away from the affordability of the market.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's not helping in any way, because there are people who need this affordable housing, but to put it across as the answer to the problems is such a wild statement. And because there's the actual economic side of real estate and what will be good for the market, then there's the political agenda that gets attached, which is, well, we need to look like we're winning. If we can say we've provided homes, it doesn't matter whether we've provided you into a home, we can just say that we built these homes and so we helped. So that leads us on into our next conversation about what is the answer. Jay, what do you think is the answer?
To affordable housing?
To make, I guess not to affordable housing per se as what I'm describing, less than 30%, but what is the answer to our real estate market here in the big cities?
Well, that's a
Okay, well, why don't I start us off from this, okay? So, I think it's multifamily dwelling. I think it's a balance. Vancouver is and I think Toronto as well, is a very single family home designated area. Like, I believe about 39% of housing in Vancouver is single family homes. It's pretty substantial, it's pretty large. Naturally, everyone in these communities, as cities get bigger and bigger, they always say, we don't want ugly high rises, housing ugly people, making our neighborhood beautiful, turning it from beautiful to ugly. And so therein lies our answer. It's going to be a compromise. And so for me, it's changing the density of these zoning areas to allow for maybe more duplexes or triplexes or fourplexes or mid-rise buildings. And unfortunately, you're going to have to take away from that single family land, just because the city has changed so much. It cannot continue on the way that it is. in order to achieve what I believe Vancouver wants to achieve, and it's already falling to the dust. You are typical old white money, so tell us about your thoughts on single family homes.
There's definitely a pressure to get rid of them. I don't believe that any city is going to just turn into no single family, and I think that family has a big part if it's, I mean, from nostalgia to whatever, the easeability of raising a family. I mean, it's got value propositions, and it's under pressure now because of affordability, but I think affordability shouldn't be the forefront of basically zoning and developing a city. There should always be family, and there should be pockets that shouldn't be touched. Maybe to your density equation, artery streets, some, yes, sure, but again, that shouldn't be in every neighborhood, and that shouldn't be just taking over, because you need single family. And what people forget is that the tune, depending who you listen to, is changing. Of housing is a necessity, not a luxury. That's fine, and the big array of from renting to owning, but I don't think that affordability should put pressure on the market that to just take single family out of it because it's simply too expensive, only for rich people, or I think.
Still there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to completely disagree with you, because single family home is not a necessity. They've done plenty of studies with millennials, and you being one of them, who are happy living in condos. Cusp. Anyway, So, and again, this isn't about getting rid of single family homes. This is just zoning single family homes, or zoning areas that are just single family homes now, into allowing to build multi-family residences. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everything will now wipe out the single family homes. It's just if somebody buys there, they can build that. So whether it's going to have to be more of a duplex, because it's pretty much, if you get an RS1 right now, you can build a duplex, and it doesn't make sense in a lot of these single family homes because they can't buy the land, build, and sell for a profit. That's a whole other discussion on the incentives behind the building, but there needs to be more units available. Plus, they've done this down in the States in a couple of areas. So Minnesota did it in 2018, I believe. It was so successful that Portland then followed. And the whole compromise is we basically need more housing. So our Vancouver city plan is currently going through a draft right now, a redraft. It's not been updated since the 1920s. Vancouver had a population of about 122,000 in 1921. Vancouver's population today is 2.6 million. How can you be running on a city plan from the 1920s, literally 100 years ago, with the population in which we have? Now, don't get me wrong. I do think you should still pay a premium for living in cities like Toronto, like Vancouver, because they do hold a premium. But Vancouver's kind of in this undecided area of what it wants to be. Vancouver wants to be this worldwide known city up there, spoken about with the likes of LA, London, New York, but they do shoot themselves in their foot.
I don't know that they want to be that. I do believe that the immigration policy allows certain amounts of people into the country, and there's only certain places that the majority of those people want to go. And if you grow up across the country from the start, and you look at the same country, there's places that are better than others for reasons, and Vancouver holds a lot of those cards. So I think it's going to attract people from domestically as well as internationally, and that just so happens to grow the city exponentially. And then it turns into, well, it's expensive, so let's compare it to LA or New York, or Sydney, or whatever.
So I don't necessarily think it's expensive so we can compare. Like when you're talking about Canada, most people do talk about Toronto and Vancouver. So, and Vancouver does tout itself as the place to be, and Toronto, center of the universe.
Well, the wise in Vancouver, we've got the water and the climate and the 4 seasons, and it's nice, of course.
Yeah, but in order to accommodate that, things have to change, and as densities grow, so should the regulations on the zoning, because that's going to allow it. Now, but the other thing is here as well, okay? So let's say you're on the west side, and what a lot of people think is they don't want the riffraff being brought to their neighborhood. If you own a $4 million home, and somebody builds a fourplex, a triplex or a fourplex by you, and each of those is selling for $2 million, you're not bringing in the riffraff. Riffraff can't afford $2 million homes on the west side. So you're just bringing in more people to the neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily mean riffraff. I'd even go as far to say on the east side as well. If you're in a $1.8 to $2 million home on the east side and somebody builds a multifamily dwelling and they're spending 1.4, let's say, on like a row home or a townhouse or a duplex, that's still a large sum of money. You're not basically bringing in the riffraff. I'm not saying like put social housing in these areas as well. So I think the fear there is more than is of course, like most of the times, it's hyped up in people's heads more than it actually correlates to what the neighborhood would look like afterwards.
Yeah, but also with that, as you pull these single family lots off and you build a fourplex, let's say, that's one less. Mm-hmm. So it diminishes the inventory, pushes the price of detached houses higher and higher and higher. So eventually that land, because there's less detached houses, becomes higher due to scarcity because you added all of this density. Mm-hmm. And anyone, God forbid, that wants to live in the east side or west side in a house that close to downtown, let's say, uses the proximity. It's just that much out of affordability.
Okay, but you're talking just for single family homes. People can still get into these homes and build their way up like they do currently and still live in those and enjoy those areas. Like the theory is now is like you get in the market, you start on your condo, and then as time goes on, you look to sell that hopefully for a profit. You've got further in your career, you build up to a house. People can do the same things. Plus, you're also looking at it as somebody who has the nostalgia of a house. Like a house doesn't matter to as many people now as it did back in the 60s.
That doesn't matter.
No, of course it does.
People that want to spend the money on it, then it matters.
Of course.
Just because there's more people with less money doesn't downgrade the value of a house in the eyes of someone that has more money.
Okay, you got a 1,500 square foot house on a lot. Well, you build a duplex and you've got two 1,500 square foot duplexes. Same size. It's just still growing up in the same amount of space. It's just a single family home. I think it's an, I don't want to say an old school way of living. I think unfortunately you can't have it both ways. So you can't have Vancouver growing in the way that Vancouver is growing.
The people that are in those houses don't care.
No, because they're in already.
Density.
Okay, then stay in those houses. Then stay in the house.
They will.
Then okay, exactly. Then their house doesn't get knocked down. They have a single family home.
Yeah.
So that's fine. If you live there already, then just stay.
If you expand, it's not about the people that are in, as with everything else. It's not about the buyers, the owners that are in now. It's about the buyers that want to get in, and the pressure they're trying to put on the system to get flexibility to get in because they don't have enough money. So it's not about if I have a house in west side and I just don't sell it, that's fine. It's about the guy that wants a house on the west side. And if you start densifying and the houses become less and less, that $2 million now becomes 3, now becomes 4, and it just gets that much further away. So
just for single family homes. This is, if you say to someone, okay, you're a buyer, you're looking to move to the west side. If you've got the choice now between a condo that's like 650 square foot versus a house which is 1,500 square foot, that's a huge lifestyle change. But somebody looking to go to the west side who can't afford to live in a house on the west side right now, but you can say to them, hey, if these changes come into effect, you can move to the west side, the area you want to be in. Instead of being in a 1,500 square foot home, you'll be in a 1,400 square foot duplex or townhouse. If somebody turns around and says, no, I want a house, that's just greed. That's just greed for their own personal.
They own instead of renting. It's all just greed.
No,
it's the same thing.
No.
Want to step up? Of course it is.
No, and you could do the same on the east side as well, but obviously just at lower price points.
Should there be options for people for market people to get into different neighborhoods? Yes, but all I'm saying is that if you start allowing everything, and they push for that. Slowly but surely, those houses will become less and less. Everyone at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone says about affordability. Everyone wants to end up in a house, period. They just can't afford it. That's the reason they don't.
No, I'd argue that.
No.
You've got many clients who have said, I want to downgrade. It's too big. I don't like it. I want to downgrade.
They've been in a house. They raised a family, isolated in a house, which is way easier, way more comfortable, and now the kids are gone. Yeah, of course, downsize. But everyone, if you say money aside, what's your prime goal? I want a nice neighborhood and I want a house.
Perfect world, everyone wants to be extremely healthy and everyone wants to be completely jacked. So we don't live in perfect worlds. And unfortunately, in order to handle the affordability side of things with how far we're growing, there needs to be change. And for me, there needs to be density change. And this is why I brought up the affordable housing. I brought up the affordable housing side because this is what irks me. Affordable housing is something which is spoken about by the federal government. I'm not a fan of the federal government. I think it's very obvious by this point. I'm not a Liberal fan right now, but I don't think we should be looking at the federal government in order to fix affordability in Toronto, in Vancouver, in Montreal. I think this comes down to local municipalities upgrading or even updating their current zoning bylaws and fixing it from a municipality level. So it's more of a local level we should be looking at. You can't expect Trudeau to come in and fix something which is still operating on citywide plans from the 1920s. It's like going in for extremely difficult surgery and I'm like, hey, I know we've got all of these cool, useful, and really up-to-date gadgets, but I'm gonna give you the stuff that they used in 1920. And you're gonna be like, why would we even do this? Why would we even, when we've got all of this other side? Once again, one of my beautiful analogies, I'll point out.
I don't disagree. I don't like that end result, but my opinion aside, of course it has to be dealt with on a municipal level. It's too big and different. You can't deal with the Vancouver problem the same way you would deal with whatever's going on in Saskatchewan or Montreal. It's all different. Mm-hmm. And the first line of defense is, of course, the municipal layer, and that in Vancouver, and I can't speak on anywhere else, massive issue with timelines and zoning and everything you're saying. Even though I don't like it personally, yes, if that's the goal, then that's the only way you can attack it, is through that densification and making things more streamlined and less red tape, less taxes, so it's easier and cheaper for the end user to get in.
Yeah, okay, we agree on that point. I disagree with your everyone wants to end up in a house. I think if it was ideal, but I think, and it's been shown as millennials and the younger generations, I don't know where they're at now, what is it, like Gen hyphen, whatever the hell they're calling these younger kids now, they care less about living in a house. You and I are still in the era of being raised in a single family home. So we see the value of a single family home from that standpoint. Whereas there's a lot of millennials and younger who are much more comfortable living in multiple family dwellings and are absolutely fine with that.
But then it just turns into not a nostalgic play. It turns into, oh, I want that luxury. That'd be nice.
Okay, then fine. Exactly that. Then I want that luxury. Okay, now you have to step up and pay for that luxury. Because as we've already, I think it's actually your phrase, it's not a right to live in Vancouver, it's a luxury.
I 100% agree with you, and that's fine. But I'm saying, no matter where it comes from, everyone wants to have one.
No.
And breaks down that want with the realities of, okay, well, how much money do you make?
I disagree.
That's it.
I disagree. Everybody wants one. But inevitably, we're not going to come to an agreement in this. I still hate you. You hate me. And anyway, but from speaking from what everyone wants versus an affordability issue, it sounds like we're pretty much in the same agreement of, if you want to look at it from the affordability perspective, there's little choice other than making us go in the complete other end of like Hong Kong and making everything into high-rise buildings everywhere.
No, there has to be less tax, less red tape, more density, and it has to happen fast. And yes, we're on the same page there.
Which will not happen fast, as we said. It's 1920s was the citywide plan, the last one. They're going through the adjustment. They'll put out a draft. People will fight it. They'll revise it. People will fight it again. They'll revise, rinse and repeat a few times. But Canada notoriously is very slow for housing as well. I mean, we were the only country in the G8 that didn't have a national housing strategy until November 2017. So that's not too long ago when you think about it. So, and again, I'm not a fan of the Liberal government, but like, sorry, people on the right, you can't say that was a left issue because, you know, who was in here before Trudeau? So we're notoriously slow, so unfortunately I don't think it's going to happen soon. It's good news that the plan is being adjusted. Hopefully that means things are on the horizon. At the moment, I think permits are about 500 or 750 odd backlog at the moment, so hopefully they'll look to speed things up, but we'll do another topic on that where we can break down into that. Okay, so I think that summarizes our chat for this week, and we'll get back to it next week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Everyone. We'll see you next week, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the little bell thing that gives you a notification whenever we post something. And of course, comments are always welcome. And we will see you guys shortly. See you next week.